You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
You doodle.
Yes.
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
It's a psychological disorder.
So, in the past, I've always thrown your doodles away. Like I just throw them away, and then so you have a fresh sheet of paper.
You shouldn't do that because when I'm rich and famous or dead, or all three, then you'll be able to sell those.
I just said
this is how his mind works.
It has now occurred to me that I shouldn't do that. I should keep them.
Here, let me make a new one for you.
And I'm afraid of what that one is going to. So, can I ask you a question about a doodle?
Yeah.
What was the hammer toe about? So you have a picture of a foot and a hammer.
I didn't promise to answer the question.
Okay,
I said you could ask.
Yeah. So you can ask, and I'm not expecting an answer, but that one was quite humorous.
I was thinking of Aaron Rodgers.
Oh yeah.
So
guess what?
What?
We have officially hit 100,000 downloads.
Is that the same guy sitting in a little room somewhere just repeatedly taking those off the net?
I hope so.
Oh no! I hope it's 100,000.
And I hope he keeps. And I hope he starts hammering that button.
Yeah.
So,
like the rat that died from.
Yeah. From too much cocaine. There are probably a lot of people who, obviously Joe Rogan would look at that and say, "Oh, that's not worth my time."
It's not hundreds of millions.
I mean, he gets 100,000 probably in a 2 or 3 hour period, but for us, that's pretty impressive, and I'm pretty excited about that. I hope that the show is something that people enjoy and find useful, but in celebration of the 100,000th download, I started looking around, and podcasts are not only growing in their sheer number, so more and more people are podcasting, but they're growing in the number of people who listen, which I think is a double-edged sword.
How so? He said listening acutely.
Yeah. Because we've talked about confirmation bias in the past, where you look for information that supports a belief that you already have. So number one, I think podcasting gives people, we're not journalists. I would like to believe that you and I have credibility because of our credentials and because of our experience, but we're not journalists. So we don't vet every single guest that we have on. We don't vet every piece of information that we promote. If you're a journalist, I think you should do that. So people who podcast are not held to any standard of credibility. So you could be Alex Jones and just say any crazy thing that you want, and then say, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a podcaster, so I could do it.
I think right now there may be some accountability standards that are being applied to him.
And I hope that is true, but prior to this, that hasn't been the case.
Right.
Even if, so Alex Jones, because he is such a well-known figure, is findable. I don't know that you're going to be able to hold every Tom, Dick, and Harry that does a podcast to that same standard. So the downside of it is that I think people can say whatever they want. You don't know what the credibility of those statements are.
Yeah, if you're walking through the grocery store buying breakfast foods, you're going to look at the person standing in line next to you. You're not going to know, oh, that's the guy that does the podcast that I hate. I'm going to go punch him in the nose.
Right. Or that's the guy that does the podcast that I love, and I'm going to go tell him how much I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So that's the downside. The upside is that I really believe that podcasting has provided a creative format excuse me, for people who wanted to promote a message and didn't have a venue. You know, you and I have always been very impressed with our own level of knowledge in
ourselves, yeah.
And so this gives us a forum that we wouldn't have if podcasting wasn't a thing.
Yeah, but it gives us a responsibility too. We continually ask ourselves as we try to prepare for these, how can we do what we're doing so that it fits into our objective, which is our objective is to present a podcast on psychological topics and issues that is good for clinicians in terms of their training, their preparation, their understanding, and is good for potential clients in terms of being able to understand what clinical work really looks like and how therapy can be helpful. Or we're just two guys with opinions. And so there's a temptation to just be, because we're in an empty room and we don't have an audience, and our minds go off like firecrackers, to just talk about our opinions about things. So we want to try to discipline ourselves to come back to the topic of therapy and good therapy and how to provide it and how to find it.
And you are really good at, because if anybody's going to wander off that path, it's going to be me. And
I am a professional.
You're very good. Yeah, you're very good at helping me to stay on that path, and I really appreciate that. And I think that we do a very good job of what our intent is, which is to provide information that's educational for people who are professionals in the field, but is also accessible to lay people. And we've always say this is not a replacement for therapy. It can be an adjunct, but anybody who hears something that we say and says, oh, that resonates. If you're a layperson, you hear what we say, and you say, oh, that resonates with me. We would always encourage you to go out and find a professional to work with. But we hope that we provide an information source that's entertaining and helpful for people. And I think we do a good job of that.
I hope so. Obviously, if 100,000 people have downloaded some of our podcasts, then we're reaching an audience somewhere larger than what we can personally encounter.
Yeah. And so just to kind of piggyback on that, you know, not only do we have 100,000 downloads, I mean, we've been doing this now for 2.5 years. So 100,000 downloads in 2.5 years may not seem impressive to a lot of people. It's impressive to me because I didn't think that we would get there. But we are doing some things behind the scenes that I don't want to expose yet that I think are going to help the show progress. And I think that by the end of this year, we're going to have a show that's making money and that is being distributed to a larger audience. And I'm really, really, really excited about that. But I'm also very aware that you and I always hold ourselves to a very rigorous standard. The informational articles that we provide, we list those when we distribute the show notes. And a lot of that stuff is scientifically peer-reviewed journal articles, so it isn't like we're making stuff up.
Well, some of it's from Bride magazine, so it's not all.
That was one thing, one article, one time, and it was just one article out of 3.
Your lesson, that's right.
That was posted with that show, and so, but the point is that you and I really take seriously the responsibility that we feel that we have to give people what we believe is well-researched, credible information, not just an opinion. We may have opinions,
right,
but we try and make sure that the message that we're sending is credible information.
As we used to say back in Arkansas when I was a child, we didn't just fall off the turnip truck. Mm-hmm. I taught at the university level in a counseling training program for 30 years. I've been in private practice as a therapist. I'm still licensed. I have one of the lowest licensure numbers in the state of Missouri because I've been there for a long time. So I have a lot of experience. When we look at these articles and when we talk about these things, we bring to the table that experience in the room talking to people for hundreds of thousands of hours about their concerns, and how do we understand it, and how do we frame it, and are we able to be helpful, and if so, how? That's what I want to talk about when these various topics come up. If I were a clinician and you came to me as a client and you presented this information, which we've just read about, how would I understand it about you in the context of your life? And how would I approach discussing it with you so that we could find a beneficial outcome, whatever that might be?
And one of the things that is really encouraging to me is when I look at the demographics of people who are listening to podcasts right now, the overwhelming majority of individuals who are listening to podcasts are under the age of 35. I think that that's probably going to change. So it makes sense, right? So people who are younger, they've lived with technology essentially since they were born. For you and I, just the fact that we can put this together and edit it and upload it is amazing. That we can even do that.
We're overachieving.
Yes, absolutely. But eventually, I think that, first off, that over 35 or that under 35 group is going to grow up, and they're going to be over 35, and then they're going to still listen to podcasts. But I also think that more and more people are starting to tune into that. And so I think that the opportunity to be able to promote and disseminate a podcast is only growing. There's only going to be more people listening in the near future.
Or there are going to be more people sending it out to the universe.
I think both of those things can be true.
Somebody's listening.
Yeah. And, I would have been happy had this show just been something that we did until we decided that we didn't want to do it anymore. And
you mean that's not what we're still doing?
No. Not me.
It has its own momentum now?
Yeah, I feel that way. And because I told you before we started today that I was going to talk about the 100,000th download, and that, I feel very encouraged that when we started this, it was a crazy fantasy of mine that we would actually be able to ever make a dime or ever be disseminated to an audience that was greater than our own families. And clearly, we have achieved greater than both of those things. And that really is encouraging to me. And now I want to really take the show to the next level. I want to, make it something. I want to see what the potential of this can be.
Good luck.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were going to have something deeper than that.
That's the best I got.
So you have a son who is in that age range and under 35.
Yeah.
And does he listen to podcasts? Because he probably doesn't listen to this one, but because he's more of a techie guy. But does he listen to a lot of podcasts?
He listens to podcasts. He also does an awful lot of topical searching on YouTube, which is the young person's Google.
Right.
And he can get videos on anything of interest.
Right.
I was at his house a week or so ago, and he was flipping through things, and he was watching an undertaker who talks about all the technical specifics of how they drain the blood and fluids out of the body and the tools that they use, and showing them. And I'm like, why are you watching that? He said, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then he changed topics to some completely different, far-ranging other thing that he was watching. He watches TED Talks. He watches a lot of music videos. Just different. I mean, his interests are wide-ranging, and he can satisfy them on YouTube searches.
And that brings up to my mind another topic which is tangential, but is something that I've thought a lot about, is that you spent a lot of time you were a high school teacher before you got your degree in counseling. And then once you became a therapist, you didn't stop teaching. You still taught. So you've got how many years teaching high school?
20
years teaching high school and over 30 years teaching university.
Yeah.
So 50 years in education. And I mean, that's not small beans there. And education is at an existential crossroads. And the universities, I don't think the universities recognize that they need to reevaluate how they are interpreting what it means to get educated. Because that what your son does on YouTube would never be credited at a university level, but he's learned that information.
Right.
And I think we need to think about what does it mean to be educated in this age of technology.
Well, I think that universities and colleges are having to do the same thing that right now many corporate systems are having to do, which is adjust to the evolutionary change of society. I don't think a lot of people are going to be willing to pay for brick and mortar 4-year on the ground college. They can get over the internet. You teach in a university in New England on the internet. You're not physically there. They're not physically here. They get credit for the course. They could be sitting in Australia or Timbuktu or Mexico City getting the same credit for the same work from the same class that you teach. So more and more demand is going to say, you can't charge me $50,000 to come to WashU for this semester because I can sit at home in Timbuktu and take these same classes and get the same quality of outcome. And that allows me to pass my licensure exam or my GRE or whatever I need to take to demonstrate capacity and learned information. So that's all going to change. And we're even looking at high schools.
Yeah.
You can do online high schools in Missouri. If you have a health issue or a behavioral issue that denies you the opportunity to attend physically in college, you can take all your classes online and graduate and then go off to college. It's not exactly the same thing as homeschooling,
right.
but it is similar.
Right.
You do it at home typically, but you can do it electronically now instead of physically. I remember when I was in high school, we had a child in our class who was severely physically handicapped and ill, some volunteer in each class who was going to the next class would carry a radio and plug it in, and the school had set up this phone system where this kid could attend class. It was the first example I'd ever seen of that. The teachers would ask questions to make sure he was paying attention or understood or what have you, or he could comment. We never saw him until graduation. And on graduation night, we were excited. And I graduated from a class of 754 students. We had not seen him until he showed up to get his diploma. And we've been in school with him for 4 years. So the technology is changing.
Right.
Graduations can be online now. We may not show up anywhere. We just have a Zoom meeting of 750 people.
So let me read you some statistics and see if you knew these things.
I'll be impressed by them.
Okay.
Sure.
So over 55% of the U.S. population has listened to a podcast. It surprises me that it's that low. I would have thought it was higher.
Yeah.
In 2020, over 155 million people listen to a podcast once a week. So that sounds pretty impressive.
And they mostly listen to them at home. I would have thought they listened to them in the car, but and some of them do.
Yeah.
But most of them listen to them at home.
Well, it says that podcast listeners consume an average of 7 different shows per week. So they may be listening to them in their car, but they're also listening to them while they're cutting the grass and doing things like that. I
have a friend who has a lawn care business. He's out working in yards all
and listening to podcasts all day.
Listening to podcasts all day long. He's got a dozen different. He likes to listen to sports podcasts, analysis and prediction and information. But he listens to our podcast. And he'll stop me every so often and say, I enjoyed the podcast you did.
700,000 active podcasts right now with 29 million podcast episodes.
And we're at 100,000. So we got 28 million.
Well, but we're a part of that 700,000.
Oh.
But, I think that is what is the fascination of podcasts, is that there's a bunch of podcasts out there.
It's the technology too. I can have Bluetooth headphones and I can tap it into my phone, and my phone can download it off the internet.
Right. And
I can be walking down the street or driving in a car or riding my bike or working out at the gym I don't have to stop and sit in front of a TV or go to a concert arena and sit in a seat with you on stage.
Right.
I can take you with me wherever I am. I can go camping in the woods.
Right.
And listen to the podcast.
Yeah. And I think that just is going to make podcasts more and more appealing over the next several years. I don't know what the end result is going to be. I don't know if podcasts like replace, news sources. I would hate to see that happen, because I think there still is a place for journalism. I would hope that people believe in that, but things just are so incredibly polarized nowadays. I don't know if there's a way to come back from that. Do you think there's a way to come back from that?
I think my thought is that it's Darwinian. Those that adapt survive. I don't know how the adaptation.
So it'll never. It's just like the pandemic and the Great Resignation, which we had done a show about.
Right.
That it's going to be different. It's never going to go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
It's going to evolve, and it's going to be different, and we don't know what that's going to look like.
So the employment numbers in America today are at the lowest that they have been in 59 years.
Unemployment numbers.
Unemployment. Yeah. That doesn't mean that more people won't be unemployed in the future. But right now we are at a pinnacle of success.
Well, we're at the historically low unemployment, and yet we still have millions of unfilled jobs. And you can see every day just driving around, people are still advertising for workers and giving bonuses and advertising their hourly wage. And I don't know what it's going to take to get people back into some of those jobs.
Immigration.
Well, maybe. I don't know that anybody's going to...
That's a thought.
That's a thought.
Yeah.
Some people think it's a good one, and some people think it's a bad one, but it is a thought. Yeah. So I don't know. But anyway, we're going to end this early. We didn't do a break. I just wanted to say, and I'll give you the mic also, to anybody who is listening to this episode, who listens to us regularly, I could not be more appreciative and humbled by what this is becoming, and excited for what the future could be. And I just want to say a deep, sincere, heartfelt thank you to everyone who listens to this show regularly.
Or randomly. If they spend the time to listen, then we're grateful and appreciative.
Yeah.
I can remember before I did this series of podcasts with you, I did another series of podcasts for about 5 years with somebody else.
And you like that
Kathy
one better?
Maupin. Yeah. No, I wasn't going to say I like it better, but I've had the experience of being at medical conferences around the United States and having people walk up to me, hearing me in conversation, and say, "I know your voice. Who are you?" And look at my name tag and say, "Oh, I listen to your podcast," or "I watch your podcast." Now, I haven't had that experience here locally about these podcasts, but I've had the experience of people coming up to me and saying, "I listen to your podcast. I listen to it regularly. I enjoy it, or I don't enjoy it, or I can't believe what I heard." But it's just gratifying in the extreme that people acknowledge it and say nice things.
And I have not had that experience yet. I hope to have that experience. I dream and fantasize about that. So I've never had anybody come up to me and say, just because they've heard my voice, "Hey, I've heard your voice before." I've had people say to me, I like Psych with Mike.
Yeah.
Well, but I've had people say to me, I really like Psych with Mike, but they already knew me. I've never had a stranger come up to me and say, "I know your voice. Who are you? Where are you?" But I am so desperately praying for that to happen.
I could set you up so badly. Yeah. Well, I hope it happens for you.
Yeah, I do too. And it happens in a good way.
Yeah,
it happens in a good way. So, again, I just cannot thank people enough for listening to the show. I hope that the show has legs and continues for a long, long time. As I said, I'm really excited for what's going to happen for the balance of this year, because I'm got some things that are going to be coming out of the box in the next couple of months that I think people are going to really like and enjoy. But until then, what I will say is that the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin Declue. And since we're talking about downloads, share the show with a friend. Make sure that everybody in your family goes on the YouTubes and finds us on the YouTubes and subscribes to the show, because that is super beneficial. Go to Apple Podcasts and find Psych with Mike and download an episode or two and leave us a rating and a comment. According to the article that I'm going to publish with this, Apple Podcasts is no longer the #1 podcast app.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Spotify.
Huh.
Which we are on. By the way, I just linked our show to Spotify about 3 weeks ago.
Hot damn.
Yeah. So we are now have a spot on Spotify.
All right.
So,
do you remember Macbeth?
What's that?
When she says, "Out, damned spot." She has that spot of blood.
Oh, yeah. So she can't wash it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just keeps
Can't
coming
get rid
back.
of us from Spotify.
And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.